Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we really need to talk about an identity crisis.
Mm.
And no, I'm not talking about, buying a fancy sports car. I'm talking about a very specific, very technical kind of existential dread.
It's funny you use that phrase, existential dread,
Right.
because when you look at the source material we're digging into today, this analysis of the SAP Learning Roadmap, that feeling is actually the central theme. It's that feeling of the ground shifting right under your feet.
Exactly. Let's just set the scene a little. For decades, if you were a classic ABAP developer, you were basically a god in your own little universe. You were a full-stack developer before that term was even cool.
You absolutely were. You'd open up the SAP UI, transaction SE80, and you controlled everything. The database tables, the business logic, the screens.
It's a whole thing end to end.
The whole thing. Whether it was a DIMPRO screen or, the ALV grid, the list viewer. You owned the delivery of that application, pixel for pixel.
And it was fast. I mean, ugly maybe by today's standard.
Definitely ugly, but fast.
But then the world changed. The web happened, mobile happened, and suddenly that one-stop shop model it fell apart.
It completely fragmented.
So our mission today is to explore this new analysis. It's titled Eingefügter Text in our source packet. And it asks this huge question. In this age of ABAP Cloud, are back-end developers losing the front end for good? Or is there a way to, claw it back?
And that's a very valid fear. For a long time, the industry answer seemed to be, yeah, you are losing it. You stick to the data and let the cool kids handle the UI.
Right, which created what we're calling the Great Divide. And I want to dig into why that happened. Why couldn't the average ABAP developer just pick up the new front-end tools? Why did we need a separate Fiori developer?
A lot of managers ask that exact question, just learn some JavaScript, they'd say. But the source material really highlights that the barrier, the real roadblock, wasn't the language.
It was the framework.
It was the framework. We're talking about SAP UI 5.
Is it really that much harder, though? I mean, we've all tackled some ridiculously complex ABAP logic. What makes UI 5 the deal breaker?
It's the whole paradigm. In ABAP, things are generally synchronous, they're transactional.
Step by step.
Exactly. In UI5, you're suddenly dealing with the asynchronous nature of the web. But honestly, more than that, it's just the sheer weight of the library. You have to manage the whole application lifecycle yourself.
What does that mean exactly, the lifecycle?
Well, you have to handle the routing, how a user gets from page A to page B. You have to manage the data binding, so getting the data from the back end to actually stick to the controls on the front end.
And if you get that binding wrong,
the screen is just empty, or it crashes. And then on top of all that, you have the compliance layer, the Fiori guidelines.
oh, right.
And they are incredibly strict. They tell you about margins, fonts, how things should interact. So if you're building a freestyle UI5 app, you are personally responsible for making sure every single pixel follows those rules.
So it's like trying to build a house, but instead of just buying bricks, you have to manufacture each brick by hand to the exact, regulation size and color.
That's a perfect analogy. And because that's so ridiculously inefficient, companies split the role. You got your back-end dev who just piped data out, and the Fiori dev who built the house.
Let's talk about that piping data part. I feel like that's where a lot of ABAP developers got stuck. They just became plumbers.
They really did. You'd use tools like SCW, the Gateway Service Builder, to manually map your data structures to OData services.
Right.
Or maybe you'd use BOPF, the Business Object Processing Framework. But at the end of the day, you were working in the dark. You'd expose an endpoint, hand a URL to a front-end developer, and just kind of hope they understood what you meant.
Which brings us to the real identity crisis in the cloud. The source points out this frankly terrifying reality for the ABAP cloud environment. In that world, there is no SAP GUI for development at all.
Correct. If you're working in ABAP Cloud, you can't just hit F8 and see a quick test screen. You're effectively blind.
So you're building all this complex business logic, defining behaviors, managing data.
But without a Fiori developer sitting right next to you, you have no way to actually see that work on a screen.
That sounds like a productivity nightmare. Like, hey, could you render this field so I can see if my calculation works?
And the answer is, sure, give me 3 days to update the view. And that is exactly the bottleneck the industry hit. It created this dependency chain that slowed everything down, and it doubled the cost. You needed 2 heads for every single feature.
But, and this is where the source material gets really interesting, where the clouds start to part. It argues that this whole era of dependency is ending. It claims we can get the front end back without having to become UI5 gurus. How?
The answer is in the combination of 2 specific things. ABAP, the RESTful ABAP programming model, and Fiori elements.
Okay, we hear Fiori elements a lot, but it's usually dismissed as, that tool for simple list reports. The source suggests it's way more powerful than that. How does it actually work?
The core concept is something called metadata-driven development.
Okay, stop right there. Metadata-driven sounds like pure marketing fluff. What does that actually mean for the developer who's typing code into an editor?
It means you stop writing code that says, draw a button here. Instead, you write code that says, this piece of data is actionable.
Okay, give me a concrete example. I'm in my back-end code. What am I typing?
All right, so you're in your REP environment, defining your data model with CDS, Core Data Services. You've got a field, let's say sales order number.
Simple enough.
In the old way, a front-end dev would write some HTML or XML to create a table column and then bind it to that field.
Got it.
In the new way, you, the ABAP developer, add a specific tag, it's called an annotation, right there in the back-end code, right on top of that field definition. You literally write something like at UI.lineItem.
And that's it.
That's it. That one single annotation tells the system this field belongs in the main list of columns on the screen, and the system just does it.
It just appears.
The Fiori Elements framework reads that annotation when the app runs, and it generates the column. It handles the sorting for you, the filtering, the header text. You didn't write a single line of JavaScript.
Okay, that's for viewing data. But what about doing things? An app is pretty useless if you can't click anything. What if I need a delete button or approve button?
This is where RAP gets really, really impressive.
Yeah.
You define what's called a behavior definition in the backend. It's basically a file where you list what your business object is capable of doing.
Okay.
If you write the word delete in that behavior definition file, Fiori Elements will automatically render a delete button on the UI for you.
Wait, are you serious? I just typed the word delete in a backend configuration file, and a button just appears with the right icon in the right place.
Yes. And it automatically hooks up the logic. When the user clicks that button that was just generated, the framework knows to call your backend delete method. The wiring is completely invisible to you.
That is the aha moment. So you're not building the UI anymore. You're describing the intent of your application. And the UI builds itself based on that description.
You've got it. Think of it like a police sketch artist. You don't pick up the pencil yourself. You just describe the suspect. He has a mustache, glasses, and a scar. And the artist draws it.
And here you're saying, my app has a list of orders, they're searchable by date, and they can be deleted. And Fiori Elements draws the app.
That is exactly it.
The source also mentioned floor plans. So we're not just talking about a simple grid of data here, right?
No, absolutely not. And this is a key point. Fiori Elements comes with these really sophisticated templates. The list report is your standard search screen, but then you have the object page.
The detail view.
Right, the detail view with tabs and sections and charts, contact cards, whatever you need. You just map your data to these different areas using those annotations.
So I can build a fully navigational app, search for an order, click it, go to the detail page, see the line items, approve it all from the back end.
All from the back end. And the speed factor the source talks about is critical here because you're not fighting with CSS or JavaScript versions. You can go from just a data model to a live working prototype in, literally minutes. You publish the service, click a preview button, and it's there.
That sounds fantastic for speed. But I have to play devil's advocate. I can just hear the skeptical listeners shouting right now, that's great for a Hello World app, but my users are demanding.
Yes, the standardization versus freedom debate.
It's a real thing, though. What happens when the business says, I need a button that only appears when the total value is over $10,000, and when I click it, a pop-up has to appear asking for a reason code, and then it has to trigger a workflow.
That is the classic cliff edge we used to fall off of. In the past, if the template could do 90% of what you wanted, but it couldn't do that one specific thing,
you had to throw it all away.
You had to scrap the whole thing and go back to coding from scratch, which completely defeated the purpose.
So are we still stuck on that cliff?
No. And this is probably the most critical update in the source material. We now have what's called the flexible programming model.
Okay, that sounds a little bit like a marketing rebrand. What is it, really?
It's an escape hatch. It's a very smart escape hatch. It allows you to inject custom-coded building blocks into a standard Fiori Elements page.
Inject. How does that work?
So let's take your example. You need that special reason code pop-up. You keep the standard list report. You keep the standard object page header. But in one section of the page, you define what's called an extension point. And into that point, you load your specific custom-coded component.
So I only have to code the one little pop-up. I don't have to rebuild the entire page just to get that one feature.
Precisely. You mix and match. You use the standard framework for all the heavy lifting, the navigation, the saving, the error handling, and you only write code for the truly unique business logic.
But hold on, if I'm injecting a component, does that mean I'm back to square one? Do I have to become a UI5 expert again?
Well, yes and no, and this is where the nuance is important. You do need to know some front-end technologies. Often it's standardized TypeScript or specific Fiori macros. It's not magic. But the sheer volume of code you have to write drops by like 90%.
Okay, so it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card for learning new skills, but it does stop you from having to be a full-time front-end architect.
Correct. And the source also points out that for a lot of the simpler extensions, like that conditional button you mentioned, only show if value is over 10K that's now supported natively in RAP. It's called dynamic feature control.
So the back-end logic can literally say feature disabled, and the button just vanishes from the front end. No JavaScript.
Exactly. The need to break out into custom code is getting smaller and smaller with every single release.
Let's pivot to what this means for the developer listening to this. If I'm an ABAP developer, and I've been kind of ignoring Fiori, just hoping it might go away,
Which many have been.
the source is basically telling me it didn't go away, but it got a whole lot easier.
It's telling you that the roles are reunifying. We are moving away from that split model of back-end specialist and front specialist.
The source actually throws out a number here, the 80-90% rule.
Right. It argues that 80 to 90% of all enterprise applications, the bread and butter apps, can be built using this standard approach, RAP plus Fiori elements.
Which implies that freestyle UI5 development, the really hard, from-scratch stuff, is becoming a niche skill.
It's becoming the exception, not the rule. It's for the flashy consumer-facing apps or maybe the executive dashboards that need to look like a spaceship. But for day-to-day business apps, invoice processing, inventory management, HR requests, standard is better. It's faster and cheaper.
So if I want to become this new full-stack developer, what's in my survival kit? The source lays out a very specific skill stack.
It does. It lists 4 pillars. And if you want to be employable in the SAP world in, say, 2026, this is your shopping list.
Okay, lay them on me. Pillar 1.
RAP, the RESTful ABAP programming model. You have to know how to build the modern backend. You can't just rely on old function modules anymore. This is the foundation for everything.
Okay, RAP is the foundation. What's pillar 2?
OData v4. This is the protocol, the language that the back and front ends use to talk to each other. You don't need to be a network engineer, but you need to understand how your data is being exposed. Associations, navigations, how queries work.
Fair enough. Pillar 3.
Fiori elements. And I don't just mean knowing that it exists. I mean, you need to study the annotations.
Yeah.
You need to know which @UI annotation triggers a chart versus which one triggers a contact card. That is your new UI design language.
And the last one.
The flexible programming model. You need to know how to use the tool bridge and those extension points so that when your boss asks for that one weird custom feature, you don't have to say it's impossible.
What's interesting is that none of those 4 pillars require me to be a master of CSS or responsive web design logic.
No. They leverage your core strength, which is understanding the data and the business process. The tool handles the aesthetics for you.
You know, the source makes this really bold comparison that stuck with me. It says, Fiori Elements is the new SAP GUI for ABAP developers.
It's a profound statement, but it's true. Think about what the SAP UI really was. It was a standardized frame. It limited you. Sure, you couldn't make round buttons in SAP GUI, but that limitation made you incredibly productive. Fiori Elements is the same philosophy. It's rigid in all the right ways to make you fast.
So the identity crisis isn't about losing our identity at all. It's about realizing that our identity is evolving from the person who codes DIN-Pros to the person who annotates services.
Precisely. You are regaining the ability to deliver end-to-end value. You can, once again, be that one-stop shop. You can take a requirement from a business user and deliver a working, deployed URL without having to beg a separate front-end team for resources.
That sounds incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
But also maybe a little threatening if my job title is currently Fiori developer.
Well, that's the other side of this coin, isn't it?
And I want to end on this provocative thought. If tools like Fiori Elements and RAP are automating 90% of the UI work, what happens to all the dedicated UI5 developers?
It's the classic cycle of technology. We went from generalists to specialists because the complexity exploded. Now, the tools are abstracting that complexity away, so the pendulum is swinging back towards generalists.
So does the pure Fiori developer role just disappear?
I don't think they disappear entirely, but I do think the herd things out significantly. The Fiori developer, who only knows how to build basic list screens, is in real trouble because a backend dev with RAP can now do that same job in about 10 minutes.
So the surviving Fiori developer has to evolve into
What?
a UX architect.
A UX specialist or maybe a creative technologist, they become the person you call for that 10% of apps that must break the mold. They become the artists. But the factory work, the day-to-day grind of building business screens, that's going back to the ABAP developer.
That is a massive shift in the entire ecosystem. It basically means if you aren't looking at RAP and Fiori elements right now, you are actively fighting a losing battle against automation.
Absolutely. The tool bridge, as the source calls it, has been built. You just have to be willing to walk across it.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
The identity crisis might just be a growing pain on the way to a much more powerful, unified role. A huge thanks to the author of our source text for laying out this roadmap so clearly.
It's a big change, but a good one.
And to all the ABAP developers listening, it might be time to dust off those learning hubs and start annotating. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.